wholesome thoughts, just like the sun dissolves the clouds in the sky, these are slowly cleared away. So think these clouds, these have been cleared away from the mind, revealing the mind's potential, its vastness, and accordingly, my body is also now in a more relaxed state. I have revealed the true nature of my mind, which is a mind that is untouched by these clouds of the defilements, that is vast and luminous. So if we think of the sky is vast, it's empty, and it's unobstructed. But at the same time, the sky or space, it can hold any phenomena, any object within it. The mind is similarly unobstructed, similarly vast or expansive. And based on that, it can accommodate all types of objects and engage in all types of activities. And because of the mind's capacity, because of its vastness, if we bring forth the correct understandings within the mind, we'll be able to engage in the activities that benefit not only ourselves, but that also benefit others. Another thing about our mind grounded in this potential is that we'll find that the more that we bring forth positive minds like love and compassion, the less space for the arising of negative minds such as anger and so forth will experience. In fact, the more that love and compassion become present, become familiar within our mind, it'll be just almost like a rainfall coming that clears away very quickly the ice of minds like anger and attachment. And once love and compassion are established within our mind, we have the basis for a stable, continuous happiness for ourselves. we have the basis to contribute meaningfully towards the happiness of other beings as well. So think, my resolve must be that I will cultivate the path towards developing these positive minds of love and compassion. That's the only way to go for true happiness. In my determination to go in this positive direction, we will recite some verses to request the blessings of the holy beings, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, to be able to do that effectively. 요말. Tenpa chom de jin she ba dra chom ba yang da ba zo be sang ye re pa dang sha su den ba me pa la da mi na ge te pa song ge cho den de pe cha wa sha gya wa cha zen je ya su ji 완대 좀 sa ji bu gi jo ji me do ra ri ra lu ji ni ge ba di song ge ji me bu wa di ro da idam guru ratna mendala kandiryata ya Chedan sogi chenam la changchu bardu dani kya suchi dagi chenyen gi pe sonam gi drola penchir sangye dropa Chedan sogi chenam la changchu bardu dani kya suchi dagi chenyen gi pe sonam gi Drola benchir sangye dropa Chedan sogi chenam la Jangche badu dani kya suchi Dagi chenyen ki pe sonam ki Drola benchir sangye dropa
Oh yeah, that thing to that ni la shawa ni is tanganzo ta so no la gawa jaba in the go jaba in Karachena. Ta shawa ni de kachimutsu yares.
So it's really important to pay attention to the activities at the beginning and the activities at the end. It's good to have a reminder of these because also at home when we engage in practice, it's nice to have these in the correct place.
Oh, ta 니저가 그렇다 보게 레카체양도 지바레테니 이나요다 개와테 니파 첨부 질차 니파 추시선로도 만로 조조 근로도 모알 내가 첨부 야레스.
And what we're going to try to do is bring forth these minds of love and compassion. But what we'll find is that whether the mind of compassion, for example, becomes powerful or not, becomes meaningful or not, this is really related to how well we're able to establish that motivation at the beginning.
다 때네서 도 때스 빙 거로 가르스 그런 간조 가 때스 디사보지 네스 지레테니 이나이테 할레비 같이 못 쓰고 야레스.
And so really to understand how the motivation and so forth work, that's something that is a little bit profound. So it's something that we begin to understand with experience.
나로수가 보게 니가 샤와이나 가리이나 가가제 또 소싱이니 야바제바이나요.
But we definitely know when we try to engage in the practice of cultivating something wholesome within our mind, even a sort of temporary happiness, that often we have an experience of obstacles to trying to do that. And of course, a lot of the times when we're trying to cultivate those positive minds, it might seem like there's an obstacle outside in our external environment that's preventing that from arising. But what we should understand is that actually, really the obstacles come fundamentally from some sort of degeneration of the potential or the power within our mind.
비아보이나래 두자이나래 두자칠 빼자와이나 무자치는 뭐 가시는도 여바지 무자테 다는 뭐 가시 셔천도 그래 뭐 가시 마셔와 드는 용어도 왔어 사침보이나요.
So everybody will have their different experience, even of the same event. So to use kind of a world example, maybe a bit of a heavy example, we know that if people are in like a car crash, in some type of collision, oftentimes you'll have several people that are very injured or maybe even pass away, and there will be some people who survive relatively unscathed. So how can you have the same situation, for example, this collision of the vehicle, and within that vehicle, there are some people who die and some people who survive, for example? Well, the reason is related to the positive potential. Some of the people in the vehicle's positive potential will have degenerated and others will be more stable.
And also,
you might experience that frustration at work, right? You might experience that frustration at work where you yourself feel like you've put in kind of like the same type of effort, the same type of thought into your work task. And yet, although you put in the same effort as everyone else, there's other people in your workplace who seem to be able to accomplish things there very successfully. And with you, that doesn't seem to be happening. So this is also related to the internal merit. And so because actually that inner merit or positive potential is often kind of determining how various situations are experienced. That is why the Buddha said, one who is possessed of extensive merit has things accomplished exactly as they wish.
So those are
the causes of happiness and unhappiness that we don't see, right? That's an example of one of those causes of happiness and unhappiness that we don't see: the merit, the positive potential, and the lack of merit within us. And not only do we need to possess some merit to have be able to accomplish successfully our worldly tasks and our job and so forth. But then especially when we talk about the cultivation of our mind and the realizations we want to have of love, compassion, and wisdom, this is very much assisted by the positive potential that we've built up within us. So when we establish the motivation, it's like planting the seeds for that positive potential within us. And we can actually think of these seeds that we're planting within us. These are for a harvest that not only we ourselves are going to enjoy. So for example, if you have an orange tree or an apple tree, you'll be sharing the bounty of that harvest with all of your friends. So in the same way, we share that bounty of the positive potential we cultivate with all beings. And so if we think about this analogy of our motivation for the session as being like that seed that we initially plant in the ground, we know that if the seed that we plant in the ground is medicinal, then the trees and branches of the plant that sprouts will be medicinal. Similarly, if the seed is poisonous, then the branches and the leaves will be poisonous. And it's really important to plant the seeds for what is positive, because we see that when the seeds for what is negative are planted, all of these countries in the world where these wars are being fought, where there is a scarcity of resources, all of this is related. And the real sadness of those situations is that in the Buddhist presentation, it's challenging, but in the Buddhist presentation, we think that there's no situation that arises without a cause. So when the difficult situation arises, and as a result of that difficult situation, the negative minds become more pronounced, what you're actually doing is creating causes to have that situation worsen or multiply. Yeah. So we also know that when those afflictions, so you have this situation of this terrible conflict, when the afflictions such as anger arise from that, we understand that the people fighting and the people making the decisions is almost as if they have lost their mind, as if they have lost their sanity. And because the decisions are being made by people of that state of mind, actually the situation worsens. So what's the starting point to kind of take care of this and to try to establish this positive mindset? It's just to settle in to the mind's nature, which is fundamentally neutral, or we could say a state of equanimity. So that's where we begin. So we should see our mind as like a fundamentally, like a very relaxed, a very sort of chill person who at the same time is easily influenced. So if we find a positive person, our mind can be led in a positive direction quite easily. And similarly, if we meet a negative person, then the mind will go into an unwholesome direction quite easily. So Geshe said it reminds him of a friend he has at the monastery, right? This analogy of the mind. It's like this happy-go-lucky person that's very easy to be with because he takes on kind of the mood of the people around him, right? And so if those people are kind of in a negative state, it goes in that direction, in a positive state in that direction. But everyone likes to be with a person who is in accord with their view. So because our mind is like that person who is easily led, The danger here is that when the afflictions arise within the mind, we're very easily led into the direction of activities that could be harmful to ourselves and others, to negative activities.
다 녀모 위쇼로 컨트롤도 다 가자도 차도 걸어서라 렘바주 잘로 지주야 말이야 대체마 요 말에 되네 콜은 간주 공부 뭐 셔와 자토 뭐 공부 요 아이사 길리라 워치는 파티도 그 요아레스.
So we're easily led by these afflicted minds like anger, pride, and so forth, not because those afflicted minds are based on truth or are based on something positive. In fact, they have no grounding in truth whatsoever. However, they arise very easily within us because of our habituation to these states of anger, pride, and so forth.
다 세코로가 니바 여보 강가 될라 때네 거 아니라 체는 지며지 요 말, 것이 도 요 말레스.
And it's a real problem because of the habituation and the sort of easy way that these minds of anger and pride arise. It's like a constant block that is covering our potential and preventing our ability to bring forth wholesome minds.
다 가서 아니 로제 강가를 펜비 세 송바 송보 세 여보 할레 자친 보 뭐보 요 아래 대지 어즈자는 가서 시다 그거 왔어.
So what do we need to do then understanding this? Well, first we need to appreciate the amazing beneficial qualities of these wholesome states of mind, such as the mind of loving kindness that strives to benefit all beings. And we need to again and again try to cultivate our mind and try to bring those positive mental qualities forth.
다 쇼바도니 지라 소바 셀 가제 냐바이나 소소키바 될라 때네 예기보 차요 방안저 시고 통교 아레스. 통야?
And we can have confidence, enough confidence to bring forth this effort because we can see very clearly that a loving, compassionate attitude is something that is profoundly beneficial for ourselves as well as all of the people around us. This is very easy to see.
대존도 맞아 걸어서를 자대 체마고 다 지바 자토 뭐 걸어서를 자대 체마 요 아레스.
Not only that, but we'll find that these minds of love and compassion are also grounded in truth, right? In the teachings, we'll find so many reasonings given for why these are valid minds.
이나 템보 요금 매바데 간줄 고메근 니바치메 아이사. 하고서 고마 뉴스바 이사 다 템보 요금도 와스.
But they're not coming, they're not being generated, and they're not staying in the way we want them to. Why is that the case? Only because of our lack of habituation or familiarity with these positive minds.
다 텔름리 야보 레바 야보 지체 요 소노토니 디쇼로 다 가보 차야도 다 공바치모 차야 간줄 그 아레스.
So what we want to do is take this human rebirth, take this human intelligence, and maximize this opportunity by habituating ourselves to these positive mental states, love, compassion, and so forth, as much as possible.
다 대서 못 다 되지 다 텔스는 디세 쇼와지도는 유아지 찬용바 다 레레지스.
So then to do that, we prepare the basis of the mind so as before we establish a state of calm, and we try to bring the energies of the four elements into equilibrium. And so Geshe-la encourages you, if you're able, when you do the meditation, to sit up a little bit straight. That will help you actually to focus.
작은 도로 육강가야 본도에 텔라테네 아니 자도 묘도 강간 중앙시 강가 찬용가야 보이는 거요.
So when we settle our mind like this, and when we sit like this, what happens is the chakras or the energy channels are sort of upright and straight, which allows what we call the wind or the prana to flow easily, and then the mind can be calmed.
미바 공용 매나 내워지도 요하르테네 다 시라 요르노야 만디스.
And so we might establish this kind of nice mental state, but if we don't take a virtuous object of meditation here, the mind itself can't actually be trained towards something positive.
为是人多啊，多人多啊，他们把做做的他点点不掉的意思嘛去。
But as a beginning point, let's just establish that mindfulness first. So, as an exercise, what you can do is take your attention, take your awareness, and place it on the breath, thinking, breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out.
个自己
If you'd like to count, you can try counting to 21.
위 나래 세 나래 아니 고로서 뭐지 인전도 요지 지마도 뭐지 템보 데디케이션 this.
So, we'll notice in that exercise whether we paid attention to the breath or whether there were things arising within the mind. Both this breath and these thoughts, they are not something permanent and stable. They are something impermanent that is rising and falling away.
답이 로지치 위 나래 세 나래 아니 리도 세 나도 가와 따가 이나 답이 로지치 this.
So if we were to try to locate something permanent, unchanging within our body, within our breath, within our mind, we wouldn't be able to find it. And the interesting thing is that the I, or the self, is also not permanent or unchanging.
나타바지 아래 소노 토네테네 반즈마리 비오게타 나로스 콜 this.
This thought thinking that the I is stable and permanent, this reinforces the ignorance grasping at the self, which is the very root of our abiding in this state of samsara, cyclic existence.
Dele mari bachega zugusa zani raya yoba kuza sta ron ye do kanga tene mandu tene tandi yare sono tone do muzuti kawal ko this.
If we try to find some sort of substantial essence, some inherently existent self, inherently existent others, inherently existent phenomena, if we try to pinpoint that essence, we will not be able to find it. Yet this appearance of things existing from their own side inherently is what keeps us wandering within samsara.
As it do I uzola maybe
So then from within that space of impermanence and emptiness, we then want to bring forth a mind of compassion for oneself and all others.
bororo soso na sete ate suji chodene no jita 순지가 공부 토바시니다 로 요절 파티시티 토바소이
And then based on that compassion, wanting to free those beings from suffering, we think that this self or this I want it to become just like Buddha Shakyamuni, completely capable of benefiting others. For this purpose, may I achieve Buddhahood, enlightenment for the benefit of all. Meditate on bodhicitta. So we'll pause there. Oh yeah, sorry. Kogi Medusa. So that was the motivation. Yeah, sorry, I maybe got a bit too relaxed during the meditation. Folks at home also let me know if you can't hear me here. Yeah. So people might be wondering, why did we take all of this time establishing the motivation? It's actually because these 4 boundless thoughts are not something so easy to bring forth, or the 4 immeasurables are not so easy to bring forth. And so this is our main topic today. It's actually these 4 boundless or immeasurable thoughts. So that's what we'll be studying together. And also, Geshe-la really encourages your questions about those.
Anita ngela tangi ngazo go jani ta so mi pa chingol uin jungo go jana de yare ane ta yo tagaze medon da watani gol si wo chaya yo na tandingol mi pa jana de yare se pi onda wote mi pa chingol kawana wo chil ta gi so ma chin de yare.
So actually, when we engage in these preliminary meditations, it's to help us develop focus for the main topic. So whatever we're taking as the basis for focus within our mind, whether it's the breath, or you could also, for example, take an image of a flower, what we can think is that we're trying to keep the mind on that object, awareness of that object single-pointedly. And this process is like if you have kind of a crazy monkey that's climbing all over. It's like tying that monkey to a pillar so that the monkey can remain stable and focused. Another example that is given is like a wild elephant, right? We first want to tame the elephant, and the first step is to tie it to that pillar of mindfulness. So if we think of the mind as like this element, we can use other examples in this illustration. You'll also see a rabbit. You'll see, along with this elephant, you'll see the rabbit and the monkey. And these represent laxity. We could also say sleepiness and excitement, mental excitement. And so we say that when we're trying to investigate a topic or we're trying to meditate and we are not able to do that, the problem is usually that we are lacking in the power of mindfulness. So if we're lacking in mindfulness, what is preventing the mindfulness from arising? What's preventing the mindfulness from arising is the laxity and excitement. And actually, the presentation within the teachings of laxity and excitement and their antidotes of mindfulness and introspection are something that very much make it easier to cultivate a mental focus. And that's why you see that these teachings kind of beyond Buddhism, mindfulness is something very popular in the world.
다 건조 타봐도 드니께자로 말해서 총자기 주마이나 고자기 요아래 로야 로타와이나 고자기 뭐야
Yeah.
남말해서
So these days, there's all kinds of courses on mindfulness for people in companies, for they're teaching it to kids in school. And of course, the people cultivating these things, right, from the Buddhist perspective, they're not aiming towards liberation or enlightenment, right? It's for another purpose.
어다 대비도 같이 뭐라 와서 어떤 간도 같이 뭐라 안에 또 셀 좋아지도 레레지요나 로조이나를 뇨레이나 그러 야보지로 야네.
But Geshe-la doesn't want to dismiss that as completely unimportant or irrelevant, because if through this practice of mindfulness, people are more peaceful, more calm, then we can see a more peaceful and calm society.
변나 야 저로서 따지서도 하고 그 체리뼈 따지 뭐뭐서는 건도 할래가 야래 대사서도 드니라 김바 침보지나 따지서네라 아니 로가지야 침보잖아요. 대만요야가 네스디셔 gem보렌.
And this practice of these practices of mindfulness and introspection are also something that is profoundly useful for our mental health. So cognitive scientists, for example, they went to some of the larger monasteries. They call them the three seats, like Sera, Drepung, and Ganden. And they would see that the memory and the mental faculties of the monks there, in their 80s and 90s, they were as if they were the faculties of people much younger.
다시 강연다 만다네서 뭐뭐지 연구하래서 노거더라 코로페트 바템보데아텔라 오코로페겐간조 달로조도 고자야 돼 그래도 침모지 연구하래서.
And especially for these older monks, when we think about their lives, they experienced tremendous upheaval and difficulty in the earlier part of their lives. But through their study and practice of the teachings, they were able to maintain a very focused, mindful awareness.
세미 빠진 걸 템보 데비칼 셜로네 젠다 초와도 노도 던디고 담 바바제 뭐뭐죠 알아스 오다 대지 오다 노도도 대지 비운다 버들에 되어라스.
So then we can think that we have sort of tied this elephant of the mind to the stake of mindfulness. But all of these obstacles of the other thoughts, the other places that our mind wants to go, this is a little bit like the monkey.
오다 디스위 안데서와 오다 던디칼 이니 메저 초와 초메바 노도 초메바 레소나 세 디쇼를 만도네 때모다 완도지 대토소나 다
So what should we do if we're trying to meditate and that obstacle of distraction arises? Another thought comes into our mind. One of the most effective things to do is to, instead of following the mind in the direction of that obstacle, we try to stand back with awareness and just observe what's going on, almost like you're watching a movie or something like that.
소소 적은으로 파 사바도 매유노로 파 사바 던디슈나
So it's just like if you want to enjoy a nice bonfire, you won't be able to enjoy and observe the bonfire if you fall into it. Similarly, if you want to enjoy the beautiful ocean, you won't be able to enjoy the beautiful ocean and its waves if you fall into it. So we want to stand back and observe. So the trick here is that actually, if we create distance between our mind and the distracting thought that arises, it is no longer as disturbing. It just becomes like something we're noticing or observing.
And especially
for practitioners who live in the city, who live in busy places, if we can cultivate this attitude of being able to observe the distraction, we'll find ourselves a lot less aggravated by the noises and the busyness of the city as we try to practice.
손지가 공부하잖아 시워서나 세 년바 차수 매봐서야 하고서라 어느 여가 세 개야 강가진 좀 맞더라 논좀 좀 맞더라 다도 되라 손지시가
So Geshe-la said that, we talked about why we're practicing, and it's to be able to achieve the state of Buddhahood or enlightenment to lead all beings there. But he realizes there may be some people here who are not familiar with what that actually means, right? So what is a Buddha? Or what does this state of full enlightenment means? mean? It's merely a state where all of the faults, the unwholesome minds have been completely eradicated and all of the positive potentials have been fully realized. Essentially, that's what Buddhahood or enlightenment is. And the beautiful thing here is that if you have completely purified all of the negative, unwholesome states of mind and their imprints, then there's actually you've exhausted all of the causes to experience suffering within your mind, right? So the problem of suffering is solved. And then if all of your own problems are solved, what is there left for you to do? Well, you have your full energy that you can invest in trying to benefit others. So self-compassion is a very popular phrase these days. And Geshe-la said that that would actually be the ultimate self-compassion, because through solving your own problems, you're able to completely be present for others. And so we can touch this principle in our own experience if we experiment with bringing forth minds of love and compassion as much as possible. And what we'll see is that when we're able to bring forth that love or compassion within our mind, then anger, frustration, and so forth, they don't have very much space to arise. We'll experience less. So in terms of these four boundless thoughts, or the four immeasurables, which is our main topic today, we can talk about them from the perspective of the mode of cultivation. And we can talk about cultivating them according to the Theravada tradition or the Shravakayana, aiming mainly at one's own liberation. And we can also talk about them from the perspective of cultivating the four immeasurables for the purpose of achieving enlightenment for the benefit of all. And so what are these four boundless or immeasurable thoughts? They are immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. So Geshe is just saying, don't be kind of worried if you're used to a different presentation of the order. Sometimes compassion comes first, sometimes love does. Just depends on the presentation. And so, for example, if we do like a tantric sadhana, we might notice if we practice the Heruka Chakra Samvara sadhana. If we practice the Heruka Chakra Samvara sadhana, compassion actually comes first in this formulation of the four. And this kind of mode is said to be, having the compassion first is said to be especially helpful in relation to the practice of Tonglen, or taking and giving. And when we're practicing taking and giving, right, this is a meditation, or like a visualization, we could say, where we just imagine that for the benefit of others, we are taking on all of their suffering. So because compassion is the wish for beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and that comes first, it's very beneficial when we practice Tonglen, taking and giving, to think of the suffering first, because that's the first step. And then so the next part in that Tonglen, or taking giving formulation, is we imagine that having taken away all of their suffering, we then give to them every single happiness. And because as a preliminary, we took away all their suffering, they're able to benefit from that happiness and causes of happiness when we give it to them. Otherwise, it's like if you try to give something to someone who's like in extreme pain or suffering, like it's not going to benefit them much, right? You want to take the suffering first.
다 문다와 가리어 다 문다와 세나만 단디스와 숑바 체메 니지 체메 가와 체메 투뇨 체메 다 숑바도 니지 메용비요 아레시 워렌도아스 이나요 숑바 쳔보도 니지 쳔보 문다와 쳔보레.
So we look at both the personal liberation, the Theravada perspective, and the full enlightenment, the Mahayana perspective. And these four immeasurable or boundless thoughts are exactly the same: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. But when we look at how, for example, love and compassion are understood in these two systems, it's a little bit different. So when we talk about, for example, great love and great compassion from the Mahayana perspective, that's something you might not see in the other perspective.
어떤지레스 다 숑바 쳔보도 니지 쳔보세나 다 노지 아니 테면 니에티도 루잘요 아마레 아니 쇼지세만요레 치킬마도 소용비요 아마레.
So when we speak of great love and great compassion of the Mahayana path, this is something that only bodhisattvas and those practicing the bodhisattva path will cultivate. Love and compassion are practiced by those on the path of individual liberation, but not great love and great compassion.
다 괜찮아요레스 니지 쳔 빼나 숑바도 니지 쳔보도 숑바 쳔메 잘라바이나 토 까야를 깔레 카와데 숑바 쳔메 테스 토 까와나 보지. 니지 체메
닝제 체메
니지 쳔볼레 니지 체메도 또 칼레카와나
칼레카와레스. And another interesting thing to think about, and Geshe-la mentioned that these four immeasurables, these boundless thoughts, were a little bit difficult. When we talk about great compassion and great love, these are said to be easier for many to cultivate than immeasurable compassion and immeasurable love.
아니 숑바 체메도 니지 체메 이제 띵엔즈 체 토벌라티니 토크요 아레스.
So why is that the case? Because when we talk about boundless love or immeasurable love and boundless compassion or immeasurable compassion in the full sense, to really reach that state of boundless love and compassion, one has to have as an assisting factor stable concentration.
다 야쳔보지를 지지는 전서 진한진가서 데슬레라고도 문도아스 페나 키도 셰메도 던더들이나 니지 쳔보시와 요아레스 이나 니지 쳔메 토바요 마레스.
So it is said that, for example, a dog or a cat could potentially have great love or great compassion within their minds. But because of a dog or cat's limitations, they're not able to bring forth that immeasurable, boundless love or that immeasurable, boundless compassion. So that's one tricky point. So why is that the case that those dogs or cats, they may be able to bring forth great love and great compassion, but not immeasurable love or immeasurable compassion? It's because of the kind of form that a dog or cat takes. They have some limitations in terms of being able to develop single-pointed concentration. And because they cannot bring forth that single-pointed concentration, they can't bring forth a love or compassion that is really immeasurable. And this goes also for beings in the lower or unfortunate realms. They can bring forth great love and great compassion, but not immeasurable love and compassion. And you'll remember from the stories of the Buddha's previous lifetimes as a bodhisattva, it is said that actually the first time that he brought forth great love was when he was in the hell realm. So certainly if the Buddha was able to, in the hell realm, bring forth that compassion, right, when he was a bodhisattva before his enlightenment, then certainly as a human being, we're definitely capable of bringing forth love and compassion. So immeasurable love, we've stated this is maybe a little bit of a high thing. So it's not something that we can generate right away, but it is something that we can definitely practice.
tingin sa tiamong ko diana.
Mhm.
Ani ta shomba cheme mele chebal do yaris.
So if we can think all sentient beings, or if that's a little bit too vast as a starting point, you can think, may all human beings possess happiness and the causes of happiness. And you're able to hold that wish with concentration in your mind. That is immeasurable love.
Ni ji chembi jalang do yare. Da ni ji cheme ge jalang do yan duas. Sono
Non so
so.
dewa dang dewa gikyu dene jumpa.
Yeah, dewa to yeah shomba rawa.
Yeah.
Dewa to dei jeto demba. Ani una dewa to demba. Karo sono to na yo ni ji chembi da jalang do yaris.
Jumpa.
Shomba.
Yeah. So that thought, may they possess happiness, and its causes. If we can bring that forth successfully and hold on to it with concentration, then that is great love.
다 텔리라고 되고 말이 예를 가서 다 부서서 손은 뭐 지금 야를 마디 예를 다 내가 그거 이제 템보 그거 손서 리라고 야 말was.
And so if we try that, right, that might not be the easiest thing to bring forth. And so what's that a sign of? That's a sign of we are not completely convinced. We haven't really thought about the reasons why every last human being deserves happiness and the causes of happiness.
다 텔가래 용거와. 아니 다 이제 체메서나 해지 바래. 아니 세제 자타 뭐라 메니라 때 강가라 동아도 타와 쇼 손비토네 다 띵에스 때 먹어라 되나.
And so then immeasurable compassion, we take sentient beings or a certain type of sentient beings or a large number of sentient beings, maybe a few hundred, we try to hold them in the mind, and then we think, may they be separated from suffering. And when we are able to hold that with concentration, that wish for them to be separated from suffering, this is immeasurable compassion. And then we can expand that and think, not only may all of those beings be free from suffering, but may they be free from suffering and the causes and the accumulation of the causes of suffering. And in this way, when we make it vast and hold it single-pointedly, that is immeasurable compassion.
This one, 다 내가 벌써 주바지 토니라 대도 맞아와 다 템보 대바 쇼소 노토네 또 단들이 이거를 찍고 잡아이나 가와세메.
And then to stabilize that, we can say, may they have the joy of never being separated from happiness and never experiencing suffering. Then that is the third one, immeasurable joy.
다요 소소 소노토도 제와 뭐야 다 대화세야 된 것들이 들어가서 거의 대화 좀 많이 봐. 아니 소매의 대화, 거와도 만데이 대화. 아니 아까서와 가와요 된 노지 소노도 해야 돼.
And so if we want to expand as we go from that immeasurable love to the immeasurable joy, how can we really bring forth that thought of immeasurable joy really well? It actually goes back to the previous step. So we think, may beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. We don't just think of the worldly sort of temporary happiness, but we think, may they have the happiness of the bliss of liberation. And because that is a very powerful happiness, it's easier to then go to immeasurable joy.
거의 대화 조연에 배우고 뭐는 아주 강가를 거의 대화 단단 용어도 아니 거의 대화 용어야 된거 용어야 다 그때 뭐 집는 와스.
And also just this fundamental understanding that that temporary happiness of samsara is not enough because it's fleeting, right? We've all experienced those momentary happiness many times. We've all experienced that momentary suffering many times.
거의 대화세 같은 거 다 그게 시워도 노아샤게요 말에마도 치 바와 노지고 먼저 출런도 주주지에 세기야.
So in the scriptures, that samsaric or worldly happiness, it is said to be unstable and fleeting, just like a bubble on the surface of the water. We know that those bubbles pop very easily. And it is for that reason that actually in many of the scriptures, it says that this samsaric happiness, it really has no essence. Of course, we need those temporary moments of happiness in our lives, not denying that. But what we want to do is to have that temporary happiness and use that as the foundation for cultivating that ultimate happiness, that lasting happiness.
哦，他第阿嘞第其他东西层面的那是么么就啊，他干那干着，
Yeah,
把这个
把自己
意
了，是吧？
思。
So that leaves us then with immeasurable equanimity, and you'll also find differences between presentations of this immeasurable equanimity. So Geshe-la, he wanted to make sure people got a break this time. So we'll break for, what time is it? Okay, about, let's say 12 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll talk more about
啊，
immeasurable
等于我
equanimity.
说年底呢，我考虑接下去有同给这些个样的，我说的是我这完这么的多，那我中间刚刚偏多些些。
And just as a reminder, especially with these public talks, Geshe-la keeps it super casual. So related to the topic or maybe a bit of a tangent, any question you have, you're welcome to ask at any time. And that goes for folks at home too. Dave will give us your
我印尼
questions.
本地在东的，我印尼本地有个。
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be so strict about it exactly. It can be, a broader question.
我呀，
That's okay.
我呀，这个。
Can people hear me? So hopefully, we'll have to start again. I do remember what Geshe-la said, so my apologies. And I was actually just saying, hopefully people at home had a nice tea or coffee. We don't usually take a break. Yeah. Yeah, they were. My apologies. Yeah. So younger lago mari chat sama transom. So Ale. So Geshe-la said, yeah, the Tibetans might be listening, so maybe you should repeat. So we will repeat. Yes. Yeah, we do have Tibetan people who listen. Yes. Ale, go on. So when we talk about accumulating the causes of happiness, we can divide that into two categories based upon the object. So, for example, when we talk about accumulating merit or positive potential through extraordinary objects, we talk about the holy beings, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So we can do, for example, in the sutra presentation, the 7-limb practice based on visualizing the field of merit. And then in the tantric presentation, we talk about the practice of the 7 purities. Again. And so on the basis of this extraordinary object, which is the holy beings, the field of accumulation, we can accumulate great merit as well as purify negativities. But the 4 immeasurables or the 4 boundless thoughts has a different type of object. It's not an extraordinary object. It's an ordinary object because we are cultivating these positive minds and accumulating the merit on the basis of all sentient beings. That's the basis of accumulation here. Yes. So we do this on the basis not of the extraordinary object of the holy beings, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, but here with the 4 immeasurables, we're really focusing on those sentient beings, ordinary sentient beings, and really using the ways of thinking about them as a way of purifying negative karma and also accumulating causes of happiness. And actually, we really need to understand that when we meditate on these 4 immeasurables, right? When we study and practice the 4 immeasurables, it is an accumulation of positive potential, which is really something that will benefit us. So ultimately, of course, we want to practice these 4 immeasurables, these 4 boundless thoughts for realization and liberation. But to bring them forth in the mind, there's going to be a little bit of obstacles. And those obstacles are very much related to our previous countless lifetimes in samsara and the unwholesome karma or negativities. But immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion are wonderful antidotes, because how do we accumulate most negative karma? It's on the basis of other sentient beings. Because immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion are positive minds that use sentient beings as their basis, we can purify negative karma in relation to them through these thoughts. We can think of it almost, if we think of an individual person in this life against whom we've committed a great wrong. And because of that great wrong that we committed, there's a lot of negative karma. If we go to that person and not only apologize, but also engage in activities to try to benefit them, we can use the person who is the basis of the negativity as the basis to purify it. And so this is one of the very most powerful ways to purify negativities as well.
다 제가 돈요 체매 계셨대 시바이나스.
So now we come to the last of these four immeasurable or boundless thoughts, which is immeasurable equanimity.
단다 돈요 체매 걸어도 띵엔저요 다 로바만 보지 니네 두바시 알아 세토고 그거 알아스.
And once again, just as with the other three, we understand that if we want really boundless or immeasurable equanimity, concentration is a prerequisite to that, because immeasurable equanimity is achieved with a concentrated mind.
다 지체는 야래 더 모이는시라고 말와스. 니네 쟤는 안전 데콜요 알아스. 코서 눈에 단다. 이나엔 데비 세 집올라 때네. 단다 체매제도 더 더요 말아스.
So this might be a little bit unfamiliar for folks of you who are new to the teachings, but generally within samsara, we talk about three realms, right? And within these three realms, we are in the desire realm. And actually, the four immeasurable or four boundless thoughts cannot be realized with a mind, an ordinary mind of the desire realm.
당 알아서 데콜요 알아 때네 이나요 주코기 세트네 나도 더해요 알아스. 괜찮지.
But the paradox here is that although we are a human being in this desire realm with the mind of the desire realm, through spiritual practice, we can achieve a mind of the form and formless realms.
빼는 데발라 다 요다 모모드 다 치는 데발라 chen 처음만도 아까서라 어다 텔레 이니면 주콜로야 시그건데 다 던디 chen 녀레 제바이나 건조 chen 데비니 몬 데빈데 차도 대진 슈 쳔버데 빼다 과반다고 매반다고 쳐노.
So how this works is you have a being like us who is born in the desire realm, and they see that these objects of attachment, in other words, these wonderful things of the desire realm, they're not leading to anything lasting or beneficial. May I completely abandon my attachment to the objects of the desire realm and be reborn as a being within the form realm, for example. And that is a way to clear away that attachment to the desire realm.
다 디가 되니 디가 다시 하지 마텔레 주콜로야 샤 건제치기 알았어.
And so if we're really able to bring forth that mind, what kind of, what kind of cause do we accumulate? We create the cause to be reborn as a celestial being in the form realm in the subsequent lifetime.
다 텐요레 체 토벌레나 구매 세치 토하레스. 건조치는 데비 니모 강가 바꿔야 이빠 첨보.
Yep.
And
once that mind of the form realm is achieved, actually, as a result of that, the affliction, the desire realm afflictions are separated from, are greatly diminished. And so that is also a meaning of immeasurable or boundless. It's that separation from that affliction of the desire realm. Yeah. So it's immeasurable because it is beyond this desire realm. It's achieved with that mind of the form realm. And just to be clear, these practices of cultivation to abandon the desire realm and be reborn in the form and formless realm, these are not exclusively Buddhist. You will see practices that can lead to this in other spiritual traditions as well. So, for example, think that you are a prospective immigrant. So if you want to emigrate from your home country, you have to think there's nothing beneficial here. My situation isn't very good here. And on the basis of seeing the sort of drawbacks of that, you then focus on the positive aspects of the place where you are going to immigrate. So it's a bit like that. Yeah, so the going from that sort of desire realm to the form realm is very similar. And so you have that desire realm, then the form realm, and then the formless realm. And so the formless realm, once again, it's the same principle, thinking that, okay, within this form realm, there's not the things I want. There's all these drawbacks. I want to be reborn in the formless realm. And then on that basis, one can migrate in the next rebirth to the formless realm. And this makes sense because when you look at this process of rebirth, right? Rebirth from lifetime to lifetime happens connected with this mind of attachment.
다 룸바 때 룸바 가와이나 때는 내가 추첨 뭐 가서나 되는 시와래 하고 가야 그럼
Yeah. So just like the person who immigrates to a new place, they have to like abandon the attachment for their previous country. In the same way, that being has to abandon the attachment for the previous realm to go to the new one.
다 돼도 알았네. 단도 그디. 다 돈요 재매서 돈요 세들 미인다마다 고사 뭐 요아레스.
And when we speak about this last of the four immeasurables and immeasurable equanimity, the word equanimity itself can be understood in different ways.
다 단다까 안들 돈요 재매 지인노네 돈요 재매 잘라바이나.
So if we were to define equanimity as it appears in these four immeasurables,
다 대용이 대매도 대전이요 뭐라고 지모치 때는 요사레스.
we could give two presentations: immeasurable equanimity according to the Theravada presentation and immeasurable equanimity according to the Mahayana presentation.
대매근도도 제바이나 쇼바고 이지고 코로솔 다 대화야 보지 그건데 누가 매바쇼 소노 돈을 자 녀래 자침보지 보지 요아레스.
And so also just to be clear, right, there's great similarities in these four immeasurables between Theravada and Mahayana. And certainly within the Theravada, the wish for beings to be free from suffering, compassion, and to achieve happiness, love, these are very powerful minds as well.
자 소노도 소생년에 여보치네 대치기 할 때는 그게 열 내바든 저도 만다 바제 뭐 요아르와스. 대화요도 마요 등화요도 마요 담다르와스.
But in the Theravada perspective, when we speak about this equanimity, it's looking at that wish that we have for those beings, right? We might wish them to be free from suffering. We might wish them to be able to achieve happiness. But the actuality of that is they won't always be able to be happy just from us wishing that, right?
그게 소만 노지 요도 마요 사야데 또 소소소 레알라레바 침보진려와요 아이자 리라와요 말이스.
And certainly because we understand we may wish them happiness and wish them freedom from suffering, but in terms of what those individual beings experience, that's related to their own causes, to their own karma, right? So our wish and the reality, there could be a difference.
알레지 엔다 파지 너무 지바지 이나 여보 가제 이나 그거 요아르 강게세 이나 그거 요 말이테니 또또 소만 노지 진거 말아.
And think about that even within your own family, right? You might have a family member who you really want to be happy through making the right decisions and who you want to be completely separated from suffering, but we can't even get that actualized within our own family, right? Much less for all beings.
그때 또 제때 코로라 발요 마도 레테.
And that's because karma really is within the hand of the individual sentient being.
다 던딜라 때네 소소소 만노지 만드네 다 자게세가 맞잖아 세 돈용을 레레 대도야시나 다 대매가 녀레 소지 돈녀 세멜 왜지 소 던딜라 같이 보사레스.
So in this presentation of immeasurable equanimity from the Theravada perspective, the teaching is, you meditate on immeasurable love and compassion, but maintain equanimity based upon what those other sentient beings are experiencing. So if they're experiencing suffering or happiness, you maintain that equanimity. That's the Theravada presentation. And that's very important and useful, isn't it? Because as we're meditating on these, when we have the end result and those beings are experiencing all those different things, we want the mind to be able to maintain like undisturbed.
다 현지 세면열에 연로겠지 이나 세메 예노네 돈요 세메에서 대하데 소소로 말해 예르스.
And so the Mahayana or Bodhisattva presentation of this fourth one, immeasurable equanimity, it's not so much from the point of view of the outer sentient beings, which is what the Theravada was pointing at, their experience and how we react to that. It's more related to oneself.
다 현지 semba서 소노 또케시 가니자 따지서 요르서 다 모두 던로서도 세이나요. 예리 쳐도 되게 다 금방 간갈 내바시 어떤 이바가야 내바가야 어다 샤왕야바 가르 이나요 예리 쳐도 되죠 소노도 요아레스.
So from the Mahayana perspective, then this immeasurable equanimity starts with an understanding, right? That so much of the problems, the negative karma that's accumulated and the suffering is related to sentient being, humans, animals, all sentient beings, these attitudes of attachment for those close to them and aversion for those that they see as far away. And so that's the attachment and aversion that is identified as the problem.
다 뒤에도 뭐요 알아다스. 단도 용서 주바 소소가 녀자 좀 던지지래된 건조 강에 줘야 매봐 요 대하데 예리 쳐도 어따테 maybe 돈이 된도 요소도 요아레.
And in the Mahayana presentation also, there's that idea that all these beings are close to us, right? Because we've potentially been connected to them because of previous lifetimes. Their suffering is something that is therefore unbearable to us. But the suffering that they experience, so much of that can be traced back to these attitudes of attachment and aversion.
다 던지지 소노 돈을 쪼쪼 덤보텔 세뇨레 가는 바체메 사디뇨레 슈치 모치요아레스.
Dunbatseme. And so then related to kind of this preliminary, we have a preliminary mind. It's not within the four, but it's also an immeasurable or boundless thought called the immeasurable or boundless aspiration.
다 롱레 젬비가 다 로아 가세요바 이노 리투가 센제 요조 니리 차도도 타나 쩨마르 뇨도 소노 돈에 덤바 세메뇨레 체토치요아레스.
So when we combine that equanimity with this aspiration, we think all of these 6 types of beings within samsara, so much of their problems and confusion are driven by attachment and aversion. How wonderful it would be if they were separated from that attachment and aversion.
다 레토미칼 다 코르 슈셰체르만 다 슈체모차 메비칼 덤보테 용거와스.
Yeah, so then that's how it sort of begins right from the beginner level.
다 딜레테 소아체른도 다 소소포게 니반다고 테스 체른도 비칼라 다 테토체 하고서라와 니리 차도도 타나 타와 지지뇨도 소노 돈에 멤버체메 멜로체메 되고요.
And so then the first is to aspire to separate those 6 types of sentient beings from the attachment and aversion that drives that suffering. And then beyond that aspiration is then the wish. May they be separated from that attachment and aversion that drives that suffering.
다 체메치가 노는 뭐라고 용기하다 대하고 같이 모르.
So it's important to see this so you can see how one immeasurable, right? It starts with kind of an aspiration, then goes to a stronger wish.
체메 레레가 노는 그런 노를 뭐라고 저래저래 용기.
And these can be applied to each of the 4 immeasurables.
단단간도 찌르자고 왔어.
Yeah, so were you doing it in relation to one?
다 대우때 슈체른도니라 다 하고서라와 어단이 바테스 체모차베가라. 다 대토지 니리 차도도 잡아데 마로 롱기시게서 플러스 체메진고요.
So then we have the aspiration, and then we have the wish. Maybe they be separated from that attachment and aversion that drives suffering. And then we have the next stage. I myself will help separate that from them from the attachment and aversion that drives that suffering. So this is the third one, and this is like a superior intention aspiration.
This one, that kolila woyun kumarwas, tandi yungwaji tas la dola malos oatanila.
And so then because this third one of I myself will separate them from attachment and aversion that drives suffering, because that is not so easy to bring forth, then the 4th point is supplicating the Guru deity for the blessings to be able to do that. Yeah. So you can have this aspiration, wish, determination, and supplication. These 4 can be applied to every single one of the 4 immeasurable thoughts. And so then it is said that also on the basis of this mind of equanimity, one's practice of giving or generosity can become more powerful. Sorry, I misunderstood. This practice of equanimity can actually become a practice of generosity. How does it become a practice of generosity? Because it is the generosity of giving freedom from fear. Yeah. And so thinking may sentient beings have that equanimity parted from attachment and aversion, they become fearless. So this is a really easy way to practice generosity. Yeah. So if we can kind of bolster our understanding of the 4 immeasurables, love, compassion, equanimity, and joy with these other 4 points of the aspiration, the wish, and kind of like the promise and the supplication, this will be very helpful.
다 대폭에 삐따고 벌써 주바지 용하셔 봐라 다 따와가로 받침보소 그가레스.
And in the background, to enhance this practice even more, an understanding of the view is really important.
동반이 라바요 아래 동반이 참모요 아래 다때 지세가 돈에 방에 와서 보소 그가레스.
Whether a coarser understanding of emptiness, an understanding of emptiness on the more subtle level, this will only enhance those practices.
나로서 내서 간디지나 노츠레레도 내서 다두레레요 아레스.
And that emptiness really helps us to differentiate between the way that an object or a phenomenon appears and between its actual mode of abiding. In other words, the way it really is.
간조 노아 강가로로 다 말이 바세나는데 노스 집을 찾아내라 디쇼를 노는 간조 노아 먹고 있고요.
Because we are kind of in this state of ignorance, the problem is that we just accept that things exist in exactly the way that they appear. But actually, this is mistaken.
다 동반이 있었는 다 그냥 그걸 사사바사바이는 된다. 내 승인했을 거예요.
So emptiness, really, for those of you who are maybe new to this concept, it's really fundamentally just the way that things really are. So I was just wanted to remind Geshe-la that we would like to have some question time for folks. So people here, you're very welcome, and also people online. Yes, Rudy.
When it comes to the moment of liberation, you put the brakes on or something so that you stay behind to help all sentient beings.
Then nganso di Jiangsu Sempa Yenarwa, then the Jiangsu Sempa Yenar nganso soso tarpe dang tanya polebdu, o nga tarpa di matob na yagadus karin senanga mutu ne semshen ropa che degores, direbesa.
다 현지 선바 야 템보 데키는 때래. 가시 현지 선바 문요다 차와 할 레비 뒤자 튀어서나.
Yeah.
세 현지 선바 동보이나 세 녀노야요 아레스.
Mare, kodi segyo mare. Ko soso tarpa dang tanya polebdu, di pangne roa soso mutu ne degiere, semshen tamche gichedu.
야 소소 지보기 때문에 다발은 던져야 될 거고요.
Yes, so that's right. The bodhisattva intention will block you from achieving that liberation for yourself alone. This is true.
이나용에서 해야 돼서 이나용 근데 녀래 체크돼 이나용 딱 안서도 지바로 왔어. 현지 선바 토 돈보 토 차와 이나용 할 레벨만 요다 차고 뒤자더니 뒤에서나 가시 세지 전에고 만족이 타발 녹이 와.
But there's still no guarantee, because what you can think is, okay, I'm not going to achieve liberation for myself alone, right? I want to achieve a liberation for all sentient beings. But the bodhisattvas in the first stages, they can meet a really difficult person. And then they're just going to be like, there's no way I can help this sentient being. I'm out of here. And then they go to liberation. So that can happen also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a famous story of an Indian pundit named Dharmakirti. So Dharmakirti, he actually had that experience. Yeah. Kochi namkala yunero. Yeah. Nakung taksa. So he met a really difficult sentient being, and Dharmakirti tried to help him as a bodhisattva, but the sentient being just remained so negative. And Geshe-la said, actually, in the story, it said that this sentient being, he had a human form, but he was so negative that there would be smoke coming out of his mouth when he talked to Dharmakirti. Yeah. So he would get so angry that literally smoke was coming out of his mouth into ears. Yeah. Yeah. So it was like the fire of anger is not just going to be kept within me, right? The smoke is going to appear outside. So it was that kind of negative person. Yeah. So Dharmakirti got really frustrated with the sentient being, and the bodhisattva intention, of course, is to want to work for the liberation of all sentient beings. So he said that he got so frustrated, and he had a slate where he was actually writing out the Pramanavartika, a treatise on logic. And he threw the slate in the air and said that when this slate crashes down, I'm going to abandon my bodhisattva intention.
도도테 마유네 코르미스네 다도 마산 깨자기라 와스 도티
Yeah.
돈 깨지고 사고라.
Yeah.
키나 깨자야 문디와.
So he threw up the slate that he was writing on and closed his eyes, but then he never heard the slate fall back to the ground.
tani 코치 지비지다비가라 지진 좀 메우샹게 스시디가레스.
And then when he looked up, he saw Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, holding on to that slate. Yeah?
다 저러 들어서 멋지레 니를 따니 세주차가 말이스.
And Manjushri told him, do not be discouraged by one or two difficult beings.
다 저러 인지 문제 단다 유이데마 놀란 걸 지바 뭐지 소서 새로 요망노지만 좀 빼자도 좀 봐이나.
Yeah.
마고바나 되게 배도 첨보용 그래.
He said, but as your first service to sentient beings, complete this treatise of the Pramanavartika, right? This treatise on logic, valid cognition, because that will bring great benefit to sentient beings.
다 드니서니 다 된다 거 드니서 묘마스 와스다.
So in this way, Manjushri was kind of able to keep him on that Mahayana path.
더 유이데 맞죠 산을 할 레비트는 간저 제체 주중 건 리바 주중 제체 주중 건 대바지고 말했어.
So the
계제시바 이자
Jeje.
라마츠가 비텐 이거든 미시 로메바 미쇼요.
So the Pramanavartika is a really elegant treatise by Dharmakirti, which completely explains how things are possible, grounded in reason and logic. And it was said that when Lama Tsongkhapa was finally able to kind of understand that text and read it, that tears fell from his eyes.
세 쪼니 세 미시도 하다 말 가토하는 미시도.
Yeah. So it's not, of course, like a cry of depression, right? It was tears of joy. Yeah.
가르치니 가토고 여선 타발은 로야 소지는 로야 봐 제체 주중 거네 봐.
Why was he so joyful? Because this Pramanavartika explained these logical reasons of why liberation, enlightenment, and the benefit of others was really possible.
말이 봐 세로지요 봐. 콘트로세아 세로지요 봐.
Why the end of ignorance and the end of anger was possible.
다 거의 누가 간디지나 좀로지요 봐. 제체 주중 거는 시요.
That there's definitely an end to this suffering of samsara.
Yeah.
So those are all things that we should like. Yeah, Dave, sorry, go ahead.
Another question, question is supplication.
Mhm.
Gurudev.
Yes.
What is the Gurudev and how does supplication work?
So the lama dang yidam solwa dapa dabo chiklab so na yene mikashi chichena lama dang yidam karires konso hako gyomares ane solwa deba kandes chiksogores.
네미 다 대도 소소 너지 다 강에 강가 거 매봐서 로바 지그레 아까서 패도 강가 용화 시그레 소 이치스더니 소사 요나
Yeah.
니소노 도나 그래서 왔어
Ale hamakona yene konso karires kola gredua. So Geshe-la was answering. I think he misunderstood the angle of your question, Dave. He was saying that like if you're not necessarily Buddhist, right, and like the guru and the deity is kind of, it seems a little bit of an abstract thing. Whatever object you have faith in, right, whatever that being of your own religion is, you can make requests for blessings. But you were actually asking what these were and how to do the supplication, right? Yeah. Nanso lama yidam, nanso the chik res di lama dang yidam, niga res di lama yidam senakare.
가제 뭐나 야그래 이도 뭐뭐 요 왔어도
Yeah. Yine
라마 이나 있어도 뭐뭐 요 좋아 왔어
yeah. Yine lama yidam kares di mambo malap di kares tamala.
라마 이도 가레스 메세텔 조 소소 다 보게 남아서사
Yeah.
오다 대지 소소 이치치사
Yeah.
오다 대지 다 라마세요 왔어
Yeah. So in terms of the Lama, right? So that is the spiritual teacher in whom you have the most confidence and trust, who you really have faith in. So you can think of it in this context, you can think of it like that.
다 예도서는 오다 가서 더 소소 보이나 지도 도마레 다 던지고 보여 이치치사고 다 던지야 이도들이 왔어 오다 대지 지사.
And Yidam in the Vajrayana tradition is the aspect of the Buddha figure that resonates the most with you. So that might be Tara, for example, or another enlightened being.
다 소소 토와 가르치가요 다 대지 소소.
And so Lama yedam.
다 소소소노 돈한테 요하면 벗어노 돈에 가르서
That's-
담아라 요하러.
And when you make the supplication, whatever is more meaningful for you, visualizing the yidam, seeing them as inseparable from the teacher, or visualizing the teacher, whichever of those is more effective, you make requests for blessings.
라마이나 지소노 돈한테 먹어서노 또요 요초래 이도이나 이제 바른다 말이야.
And you can also think of several teachers as you visualize and supplicate. If that's more beneficial for your mind, you can think of multiple deities, right? Even the merit field, if that's more beneficial for your mind.
대치 보려면도 니네선 꿈만이 고자 그더니 다 디세 요멜 다 라마를 마트 드쯤베조 제네라 소와타기나 이제 첨부요 다 뭐 모습이 와레스.
And as you make the requests for the blessings to be able to achieve the meditation, if you have time, you can also imagine that from the Buddha or from the teacher, light rays and nectars emanate, enter your body and bless you.
소와 말레비 깔까디나 시고 돈바스 같은 에서 작도와스.
And so actually the holy beings, right, the great practitioners, that's how they practiced. When the meditation was dry, when they weren't able to bring forth a feeling for it, they would supplicate and meditate for blessings like this until the feeling could arise. So that's why you see in many of the meditation practices, such as the Great Seal, Mahamudra, and so forth, the accumulation of merit or positive potential and the purification of negativities and obscuration are always the preliminary practice. And so Geshe said also connected with the Yidam, connected with different deity practices, you sometimes get different formulations of these four immeasurables. So for example, for practitioners of Yamantaka Vajrabhairav, when you meditate on immeasurable equanimity, you say that may they, instead of being separated from attachment and aversion, may they be separated from the 8 worldly dharmas. And why is that? It's because of the obsession with the 8 worldly dharmas, that beings fall into conflict, that they are looking for their own advantage, and that all different types of problems arise. Yeah. So on the basis of thinking like this, right, when things are going difficult, we have a way to sort of think that could be beneficial during difficult times. And when things are going well, we have a way to think during times that things are going well. And so, you know, this when we talk about these 8 worldly dharmas, right, that's also something to think about. Yaga Kadire.
강에 쉬나요? 대화 쉬나면서 대화가 요 말을.
Ale, losa. Yeah.
이제 다 같이 뭐 찔러서 나도. 또녀 세매 예는에 또녀 세매서나. 예 센저지 예리 차도도 나왔대. 하고서 왔어.
하고서 제.
다 진짜명아 되게는 또녀 세매서는 소속세 또녀 줘야 돼.
So Geshe just wanted to, before we take the next question, make one important point that he didn't share in the teaching, which is that when we talk about immeasurable equanimity in the context of the 4 immeasurables, that is looking outward to all sentient beings being separated from attachment and aversion. When we talk about the 7-point cause and effect instruction with equanimity as the basis, then you have seeing all beings as one's mother, remembering their kindness. That is really oneself being separated from this attitude of holding some close and others far away.
대치 용거래. 다 나제노 제깔이 요 또녀 잡지 녀세 녀바지 뭘 또 모인 거로 왔어. 대요들이 말했어.
Ale.
대wan 대바 녀바. 능한 문대바. 로와 요조 녀바. 대소는 또 야데레스.
Nyampasana?
나제녀지.
Yeah.
나제녀지 간 거 동보 녀바지 또녀다고지 고고게 그 이제 가로.
제.
나제녀바.
제. Yeah. Dagje nyamba.
나제녀바가 대 디녀바데. 안다 되니까 말했어. 당기대.
Ale, los.
대wan 강가로로 대와 그거 요바 녀바. 강에 그거 매바 녀바. 대소는 또.
And then in the point about equalizing and exchanging self and others, equanimity is cultivated from a different perspective, which is that we want to have an equanimity between seeing ourselves and others as essentially the same, experiencing the suffering of ourselves and others as essentially the same, experiencing the happiness of ourselves and others as essentially the same. So the equanimity is more coming from the perspective of not having that separation. Yes. So these are three ways to understand this word of equanimity. But whichever of these three types of equanimity that you practice, the result will be that the mind is more peaceful and happy. So from thinking about the benefit of others, one's own benefit is naturally achieved. Yes, so that's the smart way to practice. Yes, sir. Can always helping people become like an ego trick. Mi kaji ne ropa chegen dene ngagel gigyu tets chagi maribes. Mi kaji ne ropa chegires ngagel gigyu double chagires.
Yeah, that thing I just enjoy to your return. That's shit to the Najan she was.
Yeah.
Taina, that Robert Jaco. Because she children to Yona only got days in the was to do the more than you.
Yeah, so it's true that ego or in this, like there could be a kind of pride of like thinking that I'm always helping others. But what Geshe-la is saying is that helping others is so beneficial that the benefit of helping that other person, the power of that is going to exceed whatever pride it's mixed in with. But definitely, like we want to reduce the pride connected with it as much as possible. Sure.
Yeah, that's what to tell us. On
So Geshe-la said, like, you want to be courageous in benefiting others, but pride and courage can sometimes be a little bit difficult to separate. And also love and attachment can be a little bit difficult to separate. So those are things to pay attention to. But he thinks that like, if there's a little bit of pride mixed in and that compels you to do something that benefits other people, maybe it's not necessarily so bad in the beginning. Yeah. Yes, Rudy.
Equanimity. Is there an element of difference in there? Something that rises above bad?
Nganso tangyom gi nanglola samsam nganso di donang mepa dapo chaya gi nyanga marebes karin sana yapo chung na duksha chung na chikpa dapo res di yang tangyom dapo re ro. So that equanimity in the sense of indifference, that can be the kind of equanimity that you're thinking about just to get the mind sort of calm and peaceful at the beginning of the meditation. But actually the equanimities that we were talking about, right? Beings being separated from attachment and aversion and so forth, those kinds of equanimity are more difficult to cultivate, but they're also more beneficial. That kind of equanimity, which is more like the indifference, that's just a preliminary practice where it's like, yeah, we're just like not bothered. We're not bothered at the beginning just to get the mind calm so that we can do the rest of the meditation. Yes.
I was thinking, I've heard this phrase sometimes about golden chains or something like that, as a thing about virtuous activity.
Right.
Negative activity, virtuous activity.
Yeah.
It's better than negative activity, but it's still change.
Oh, I see.
I'm thinking, you did that all behind. That's I'm looking for a dynamic.
Oh, yes. They keep you in samsara, you're saying. Whether the activity is negative or positive, it's still binding you to samsara, right? Nganso gyu kola samlo tangna chatsangwa korwe gi gyu re dua roa deni chatsangwa damya dapochi nganso gewa sana mi gewa sana chatsangwa korwa nangla de gi gyu dapo chagi re dua so roa deni dites nyora saboresa.
Mimi chatsangwa kola de ag nganso leka chi was. Anta teji kola toy
Korle drove gi gyu. So it becomes chains depending on your way of thinking, right? But that's why we're learning the things that were discussed today, so that the positive activities we do, rather than becoming a cause that keeps us in samsara like a chain, it actually becomes a cause to be separated from samsara. And when we talked about, if you think about chains, really this mind of attachment and aversion, this is like one of the main kind of chains that is keeping us stuck here within samsara. This concept of self and others, if we engage in the virtuous practice of trying to stop holding close and distant, that will become a really powerful cause to get out of here, to get liberated from samsara. So I guess that's finished. Dave, is there anything there? Yeah, okay. Minzu-san.
오야 다 겨우고기 스카빙 거네 겨우 보면서.
So Geshe and I will just do a short dedication prayer, and then we'll finish the session. Changjo Samjo Rinpoche Magye Panam Jeju Chi Jewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa Shu Tongni Tawa Rinpoche Magye Panam Jeju Chi Jewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa.
오제 간이 비니 니발라티네 다 먹에도 뭐제가 좀 이거 토야를 다 간에 가서 되지 간가 너 소망이 질라티네 쇼마이다 다 소망이 바셔와지.
So then through the merits, through the positive potential of myself and others, may all the terrible wars and conflicts in the world that are so visible right now, may they be cleared away. May these wars and conflicts that are causing the arising of negative minds in sentient beings, may these negative minds be cleared away, and may they be replaced with positive minds of loving kindness.
강에 특히 뭐 못해지는 당 하루서도 집아지 주려도만 자 여와 때는 것도 대전 세면에 강에 뭐 가서 되겠어.
And think about those beings who, because they just happen to be in these zone of conflict, they are experiencing all those sufferings. And think about what that would be like for us. They're the same in wanting happiness and not wanting to suffer, yet they suffer. May their suffering be cleared away.
너나 뭐게 뭐트 내요 유아지 내발아서 포카르 이나다 바시 질도지.
May the wars, diseases, degradation of the environment, and imbalances of the elements and the connected suffering be completely cleared away through the dedication of these merits.
소망에 막뭐 소망에 막라 때는 라마이바 간디지가 바이나 인자와도네 다 소마서 뭐시다.
May deities possessing negative minds, may humans possessing negative minds, may any sentient being possessing negative minds, through these merits, may these be cleared away and replaced with positive mental qualities.
너나 거의 내가가 바 매바차는 다 다진다고 지내야 되네. 대신 내마샤더라.
May these suffering realms of samsara be completely purified. May they become a pure land, the source of only happiness. May I myself become capable of actualizing this. Today, I have done something which contributes to the welfare, to the happiness of others. I have done something good. So we'll end the session there. Thanks, everybody.